cheating billionaire runs into his ex-wife, breaks down in tears when he sees his children. Prepare to witness a story of shattered vows, hidden secrets, and a fateful reunion that ignites long-buried emotions. Meet Alexander Caldwell, a self-made billionaire whose ambition led him to choose fortune over family. Once he was married to the gentle and devoted Catherine, nicknamed Kate, the mother of his two precious children. Their divorce was a scandal that rocked their social circle. Now, years later, a chance meeting brings the past crashing back. Old wounds will resurface, new truths will unfold, and a love once tested by betrayal will demand ultimate resolution. Will guilt, regret, and the power of redemption redefine their destinies? Alexander Caldwell was born with humble beginnings in a small suburb outside Seattle. His mother, Gloria Caldwell, taught piano lessons to neighborhood kids, while his father, Harvey Caldwell, worked as a mechanic in a local repair shop. Alexander learned early on the value of money and the allure of wealth, especially when he watched his parents struggle to make rent every month. He promised himself that one day he would earn enough to banish financial insecurity forever. As a child, Alexander often sat in the dimly lit living room, watching his parents argue over unpaid bills. His mother's hands trembled as she balanced the checkbook, her frustration barely contained. "We're 3 months behind on rent, Harvey," she whispered to his father, who rubbed his temples in exhaustion. Alexander clenched his small fists. He didn't understand stocks or investments, but he knew one thing: money meant power. He swore to himself that one day he would never have to see his family struggle like this again. At 21, Alexander met Catherine, Kate to her close friends, during a summer internship at a publishing house. She was everything he wasn't: carefree, gentle, and unshaken by her modest background. With her warm smile, Kate saw the good in everyone, and Alexander quickly realized that her simplicity was mesmerizing. Their late-night conversations about dreams and love blossomed into something deeper. Within a year, they were married in a small ceremony by a tranquil lake, vowing to stand by each other through thick and thin. From that day on, he believed love could conquer all. What Alexander didn't anticipate was how his unquenchable thirst for financial success might lead him astray, blurring the lines between devotion to family and the temptations of a life he had always fantasized about. After marrying Kate, Alexander dedicated every waking moment to transforming himself into a business success. He pursued investment strategies, devoured books about entrepreneurship, and attended every networking event he could find. While Kate supported him in every possible way, cooking late-night meals when he returned from seminars, listening patiently to his endless chatter about stocks and portfolios, she sometimes felt overlooked. Yet her love for him endured, carrying her through each long, solitary night. Eventually, Alexander's hard work paid off. He started a tech consulting firm with 2 close associates, Mark Spaulding and Allison Myers, names that would soon be associated with one of Seattle's fastest-growing startups. They developed software solutions for small businesses, eventually catching the eye of major investors like Jeremy Roberts, a Silicon Valley magnate known for turning small ventures into thriving behemoths. When their firm received a multi-million-dollar investment, Alexander became an overnight sensation in the tech world. His firm's valuation skyrocketed, and the man who had once barely afforded his college textbooks found himself riding in private jets and hosting lavish parties. Kate watched him ascend into a new stratosphere of wealth, hoping that, despite all the glitz and glam, her loving husband would remain grounded in the family values they once shared. As Alexander's star rose, so did the demands on his time. What began as a noble quest to secure a better future for his family soon became an obsession with status. He found himself rubbing elbows with the city's elite, attending gala dinners, hobnobbing with politicians, and forging strategic alliances with corporate tycoons. Late nights turned into early mornings. Weekend getaways with Kate were replaced by business trips to Dubai, London, and Singapore. Despite Kate's attempts to maintain a semblance of normalcy, family dinners, movie nights, or simple walks in the park, Alexander was often preoccupied. The more success he tasted, the more unstoppable he felt. Their tender rituals of affection, long hugs after a tough day, shared laughter over silly jokes, were replaced by phone calls that ended abruptly with, "I'll call you back, I'm busy." When Kate became pregnant with their first child, Alexander was elated, but also anxious about balancing fatherhood with his skyrocketing career. They named their son Adrian, and 2 years later, welcomed a daughter named Sophie. Both children had Kate's gentle heart and Alexander's intense eyes. Kate hoped their little ones would remind Alexander of what truly mattered. But as Alexander's empire expanded, their once intimate bond showed the first cracks of discontent. As the children grew, Kate devoted herself to motherhood. She found fulfillment in little Adrian's curious questions about the world and Sophie's bright-eyed wonder. But she also noticed the subtle transformations in Alexander. His phone buzzed incessantly, messages from business partners and new connections that seemed more urgent than anything happening at home. During the launch of a cutting-edge software suite, Alexander crossed paths with Tatiana Rossi, a striking Italian marketing executive known for her charisma and unapologetic flirtations. Tatiana was everything the high society world craved: elegant, cunning, and utterly captivating. She captured Alexander's admiration when she praised his entrepreneurial genius in front of a circle of billionaires at a private cocktail event. In the swirl of champagne glasses and hushed conversations, small gestures, like Tatiana's lingering touch on Alexander's arm, sparked an undeniable electricity. He brushed off his feelings at first, insisting he was happily married. But as time passed, business meetings with Tatiana stretched into late dinners, and her encouraging words fed Alexander's ego in ways Kate's quiet love could not. A single spark of fascination grew into a dangerous flame of temptation. Alexander found himself at a crossroad, unaware that this fleeting thrill would set his life on an irreversible course toward betrayal. Kate had always trusted Alexander. She believed in his integrity and the sacredness of their vows. But small, disturbing signs began to chip away at her faith. She noticed lipstick stains on Alexander's shirt collar, a stray perfume scent clinging to his expensive suits, vague explanations for his late returns. Her initial worry soon turned into restless nights of waiting in a dark living room, eyes fixed on the clock, phone in hand, wondering where her husband really was. One evening, Kate decided to surprise Alexander at his office. She carried a small box, his favorite homemade lemon bars, hoping to remind him of the simple joys they once shared. As she entered the sleek glass building, the receptionist hesitated. "Mr. Caldwell isn't expecting anyone." "That's okay," Kate smiled. "I just want to say hi." She walked down the hallway, her heels clicking against the marble floor. As she approached his private meeting room, she heard soft laughter, a woman's voice, sultry and playful. Kate's stomach tightened. Peering through the slightly open door, she saw Alexander leaning close to Tatiana. The Italian woman ran her fingers over his cufflink, whispering something that made him chuckle. The sight sent a sharp pain through Kate's chest, her breath catching in her throat. The box of lemon bars slipped from her grasp, landing on the floor with a soft thud. Alexander turned sharply. Their eyes met, his wide with shock, hers brimming with unshed tears. Kate confided in her sister Helen White, who worked as a school counselor. Helen recognized the familiar symptoms of heartbreak and advised Kate to confront Alexander directly. However, each time Kate tried, Alexander was either too busy or too evasive. Frustration and anger brewed inside her, but she still clung to the belief that there had to be a reasonable explanation. Eventually, Kate's suspicion drove her to hire a private investigator, James Coleman, a retired police officer known for his discreet services. At first, she felt guilty for going behind Alexander's back, but her yearning for the truth outweighed any reservations. When Coleman reported that Alexander was frequently seen with Tatiana after business meetings, Kate felt her world tilt on its axis. The final confirmation of Alexander's affair hit her like a physical blow, leaving her breathless with despair. Kate's heart pounded as she rehearsed her words in the mirror, tears blurring her reflection. She waited until Adrian and Sophie were asleep before pacing the living room in agonizing anticipation. When Alexander finally stepped through the door around midnight, smelling faintly of expensive liquor and unfamiliar perfume, Kate's worst fears were confirmed. "Where have you been?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Late meeting," he muttered, avoiding eye contact as he hung up his coat. "Then why?" she demanded, her knuckles white from gripping her phone. "Do I have photographs of you with that woman?" Alexander froze, all color draining from his face. In that moment, the veneer of his success cracked. He tried to stammer out an explanation, some convoluted story about working on a new marketing pitch, but the evidence was irrefutable. The images, time-stamped and stark, showed him in intimate embraces with Tatiana. Kate's tears flowed freely, and for once Alexander didn't know how to salvage the situation. He apologized profusely, begging for forgiveness, but the avalanche had already started. Her heartbreak was etched on her face, and the betrayal was too deep to ignore. Their confrontation was a stark reminder that no amount of money could repair a shattered trust. The fallout was swift and devastating. The moment Kate uttered the word divorce, Alexander felt his carefully crafted life begin to crumble. He pleaded, insisting he would end the affair and focus on family, but Kate was resolute in her pain. She believed second chances might be possible for minor indiscretions, but betrayal at this level, carried on in secrecy for months, was more than her heart could bear. In the weeks that followed, the house grew silent. Adrian sensed his mother's sadness, and Sophie often cried at night without fully understanding why. Alexander tried to pretend everything was normal, but guilt gnawed at him relentlessly. Yet part of him remained convinced he could fix it all if only Kate would see reason. He offered her lavish gifts, including a diamond necklace worth a small fortune, but each attempt at material reconciliation only pushed her further away. When the divorce papers arrived, Alexander sat alone in his lavish study, staring at the thick stack of documents. He realized that despite all he'd achieved, his billionaire status, his immaculate reputation in the business world, his membership in exclusive clubs, he was losing the one thing money could never replace, the love of his life and the stability of the family they had built together. Kate moved out of their penthouse, taking Adrian and Sophie to a modest home closer to her sister Helen. She couldn't bear the lavish environment that reminded her of Alexander's duplicitous lifestyle. Her decision was painful, but necessary. In the quiet suburban streets, she found solace. Perhaps distance from Alexander's glamorous and now tainted world would help her heal. The legal process was harrowing. At the suggestion of her lawyer, Henry Patterson, Kate fought for full custody of the children. To her surprise, Alexander agreed without much resistance, though he insisted on visitation rights. The media, always hungry for scandal, sniffed out the story. Billionaire tech mogul faces divorce over infidelity, splashed across tabloids. Alexander's name was dragged through the mud, damaging not just his reputation, but the credibility of his company. Investors grew hesitant, and employees questioned their leader's morals. Tatiana Rossi attempted damage control, but her influence only went so far. Rumors swirled that the affair fizzled once Tatiana realized Alexander's scandal jeopardized her own professional standing. In the end, she vanished from his life as discreetly as she had appeared. Alexander found himself alone, floundering in guilt and forced to face a new reality, one where his ex-wife and children were beyond arm's reach. Months after the divorce, Alexander's penthouse felt more like a mausoleum than a home. Each room echoed with memories of Kate's laughter and the children's playful footsteps. The silence was crushing. Guilt and regret shadowed him wherever he went. His once thrilling schedule of high-stakes deals and exclusive events seemed hollow now. The divorce settlement left Kate with a significant portion of his wealth, which only highlighted the irony that his pursuit of financial security had cost him his family. Though he was still a billionaire, the taste of success had turned bitter. His company wobbled under the strain of negative press and the departure of his partner, Alison Myers, who felt betrayed by Alexander's poor judgment. Stripped of the warm companionship that once sustained him, Alexander realized a disturbing truth. The empire he'd built was perched on a foundation of vanity. He tried therapy sessions with Dr. Joanna Clark, hoping to find a glimmer of redemption. The therapy exposed his deep-seated fear of poverty and abandonment, traumas from childhood that had driven him to chase wealth at any cost. Through these revelations, he recognized his own self-destructive flaws, yet acceptance alone couldn't mend the rift he'd created in the lives of Kate, Adrian, and Sophie. In her new suburban life, Kate began to rediscover herself. Her small home on Elmwood Drive was modest, a 2-bedroom rental with a backyard, but it felt more genuine than any marble-floored penthouse ever did. The children adjusted to a calmer routine. Adrian enrolled in 3rd grade at a local elementary school, and Sophie toddled around the living room, scribbling on coloring books. Kate found a part-time position as an editorial assistant at Redwood Publishing, thanks to her connections from her old internship days. The job gave her a sense of independence and allowed her to provide for her children without relying solely on alimony. Although money was tighter, her heart felt lighter for the first time in years. Gradually, she built a supportive network of friends and neighbors, people like Linda Martinez, a single mom who shared stories of resilience, and Dylan Price, a friendly neighbor who often offered to babysit Adrian and Sophie in emergencies. In these interactions, Kate regained her sense of worth. She discovered that even though her marriage had failed, her identity extended beyond just being a wife or mother. Occasionally, Kate would feel the sting of betrayal, but she also felt relief in having escaped the toxic environment that Alexander's ambition had created. Little did she know, fate was about to intervene once more. 2 years slipped by, and Alexander spent them in a mental fog. His therapist encouraged him to seek ways to heal, to move forward. Despite the shame and regret, he missed his children terribly. Their laughter haunted him in dreams, leaving him waking up in tears. On a brisk winter afternoon, while heading to a meeting, Alexander found himself in the parking lot of a new family restaurant, The Warm Hearth, recommended by a colleague. As he exited his sleek black Mercedes, the sight of a familiar figure nearly caused him to drop his car keys. There was Kate, standing by a modest sedan, gently placing Sophie into a booster seat. Adrian, taller now, fiddled with a toy in the front seat. Time seemed to slow, the din of traffic fading into a distant hum. Kate hadn't noticed him yet. She was wearing a cozy scarf and a simple coat. Alexander felt a rush of conflicting emotions, love, guilt, joy, and overwhelming sorrow. He was tempted to hide, but something in him yearned for connection. So he took a hesitant step forward, heart pounding. "Kate?" he managed, voice trembling. She turned, her eyes widening as they met his. In that fleeting moment, all the buried feelings surged back to life. Kate froze. A swirl of memories, both sweet and painful, pressed down on her. Adrian looked up from the car, recognized his father, and stared uncertainly. Sophie, too young to remember much, just blinked in puzzlement. For a second, Kate considered feigning indifference, but her trembling hands betrayed her. She swallowed the knot in her throat. "Alexander," she said, forcing politeness into her tone. "Hello?" He offered a small, hopeful smile. "Hi, Kate. Hi, kids." Adrian mumbled a subdued, "Dad," and Sophie merely gaped at him, fascinated by this stranger who seemed to know her. They stood in awkward silence, the crisp wind biting at their faces. Kate noticed Alexander had lost weight. His once confident posture seemed diminished. Everything about him looked worn and tired. In his eyes, she saw a depth of remorse she hadn't believed possible. "Can we talk?" Alexander finally asked. Kate hesitated, glancing at the children. She didn't want to make a scene in the restaurant parking lot. Reluctantly, she nodded. "The kids need to get home," she said quietly. We can talk another time." Alexander breathed a sigh of relief, as if her willingness to even consider meeting was a gift he didn't deserve. Little did he know that conversation would change the course of both their lives. True to her word, Kate reluctantly agreed to meet Alexander a week later. They chose a neutral location, a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town where the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the scent of newly baked pastries. The cafe was cozy, with mismatched chairs and vintage posters lining the walls, a stark contrast to the upscale venues Alexander used to frequent. When Alexander walked in, Kate had already settled at a corner table, her fingers nervously tapping on a porcelain cup. The tension was palpable. No words could erase the heartache she had endured. Nonetheless, Alexander mustered his courage, ordering a simple black coffee instead of his usual latte. He sat across from her, painfully aware of how time had changed them both. "I'm sorry," he began, his voice tremulous. "I've had years to think about what I did." Kate clenched her jaw. And I need you to know, I regret everything," he said, eyes brimming with tears he fought to keep back. "I lost you, and I've never forgiven myself." Silence hovered between them. Kate had braced for anger, but his raw remorse cut deeper than she expected. She felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to comfort him, and another part wanted to walk away forever. Before they delved into the painful recollections of their past, Kate shifted the conversation to a topic she held most sacred: Adrian and Sophie. Alexander's face lit up at the mention of their names, revealing a longing that nearly broke Kate's resolve. She carefully described Adrian's newfound love for basketball, the trophies he'd earned in his junior league, and how Sophie had started ballet classes, fluttering around the living room in a pink tutu. Alexander listened with rapt attention. Each piece of news about his children was a testament to everything he had missed. His voice caught in his throat as he asked, would it be possible to see them more often?" Kate regarded him carefully. "I want them to have a father," she admitted, "but I won't let them get hurt again. They've adjusted to life without you. I can't risk you vanishing on them." He nodded solemnly, understanding the unspoken terms. "I promise I won't. I've changed." She wanted to believe him, but wariness clung to her heart. They agreed on a slow, cautious reintroduction. For now, Kate allowed Alexander supervised visits, short and infrequent, to test the waters. She remained guarded, unsure if the man before her was truly repentant or simply desperate for redemption. In the weeks that followed, Alexander made earnest attempts to reconnect with Adrian and Sophie. He invited Adrian to a father-son lunch at a casual burger joint, mindful to choose a place that wasn't ostentatious. For Sophie, he attended her ballet recital, standing in the back of the auditorium, applauding with tears in his eyes as she spun in her pink tutu. Kate observed these gestures from a distance, torn between hope and skepticism. While Adrian seemed reserved but receptive, cautious in the presence of a father who once disappeared, Sophie was shy, unsure how to react to a man who was part of her life in name but not in memory. Yet, with each meeting, they warmed up by small degrees, bridging the gap that once seemed insurmountable. Still, Kate wrestled with recurring nightmares of Alexander's betrayal. On the nights she couldn't sleep, she found herself staring at old wedding photos, recalling the radiant smiles that foreshadowed a love she thought would last forever. She confessed her conflict to her sister Helen, who urged her to remain strong and cautious. Helen reminded Kate that forgiveness was one thing, reconciliation another. The question loomed: could Alexander truly mend what was broken, or would this be yet another empty promise? One evening, as Alexander was leaving Kate's house after a brief visit with the kids, he crossed paths with Dylan Price, the friendly neighbor who had supported Kate since her move. Dylan was a handsome, good-natured man who had been a father figure of sorts to Adrian and Sophie, teaching Adrian how to handle a basketball properly and often inviting them over for backyard barbecues. Alexander's chest tightened when he saw how naturally Dylan fit into his former role. A wave of jealousy and regret washed over Alexander. He realized that in his absence, others had stepped in to fill the void he'd left in his children's lives. In a moment of insecure bravado, Alexander extended his hand to Dylan with a forced smile. Dylan shook it politely, but there was no mistaking the tension. Kate watched them from the doorway, uncertain if a confrontation was looming. Later that night, Alexander wrestled with his emotions. He couldn't deny a pang of envy when he saw how Dylan made Adrian laugh, or how Sophie ran up to him with unrestrained affection. But he also knew he had no right to be jealous. After all, it was Alexander who had torn apart his own family. He had to come to terms with the consequences of his decisions, no matter how agonizing they might be. Amid Alexander's personal turmoil, his business world was also in a state of upheaval. Investors remained skeptical of re-engaging with his company after the scandal. Mark Spaulding, his longtime friend and remaining co-founder, was scrambling to keep the company afloat. Financial reports showed a dip in revenue, and the board was growing restless. They considered removing Alexander from his leadership role, citing public relations nightmares and questionable decision-making. Realizing he was on the brink of losing everything he had once prized, Alexander threw himself into damage control. He arranged meetings with potential clients and spent late nights at the office, determined to prove he could still deliver results. He even considered selling off a portion of his shares to free up capital and stabilize the business. However, the shadows of his personal life still loomed. In between conference calls and investor pitches, Alexander's mind would drift to Adrian's next basketball game or Sophie's upcoming ballet performance. He felt torn, desperate to reclaim his role as a father, while also racing to salvage his billionaire empire. For the first time, Alexander wasn't sure which path to prioritize. As irony would have it, the wealth he once chased now felt like an albatross, preventing him from fully repairing the bond with his children and ex-wife. Meanwhile, Kate watched Alexander juggle work crises with fatherly responsibilities. She couldn't ignore how hard he was trying, attending Adrian's games, reading bedtime stories to Sophie via video calls, and scheduling therapy sessions recommended by Dr. Joanna Clark to address his past decisions. She saw sincerity in his eyes that had been absent for years. One Saturday afternoon, after Sophie's ballet practice, Alexander offered to drive Kate and the children home. Though reluctant, Kate agreed. The short car ride was filled with polite conversation about the children's upcoming schedules. Once they arrived, a heavy silence fell. Kate mustered her courage and said, "Look, I see you're trying. The kids see it too. But it's not easy to forget everything." Alexander's voice quivered. "I understand," he whispered. "I don't expect forgiveness overnight. Just thank you for letting me be here for them." For a brief moment, Kate felt a pang of compassion. She recalled the young man she fell in love with, the one who adored sunsets by the lake and cried during sappy romantic movies. Beneath the mistakes and the wealth, there was still a thread of the Alexander she once knew. Whether that thread could mend their shattered history remained to be seen. As Alexander's presence around Kate and the kids became more frequent, whispers began circulating in their small neighborhood. Linda Martinez, always chatty, casually mentioned seeing Alexander pick up Adrian from school. Dylan overheard neighbors speculating that the former couple might be reconciling. With each rumor, Kate felt the weight of watchful eyes upon her. She found herself at a crossroads. She had built a new life free from Alexander's betrayals, establishing an emotional fortress around her heart. Was she ready to lower her defenses, even a fraction, to let Alexander back in? Or would that risk the fragile peace she had cultivated? At the same time, Dylan's subtle hints of affection grew more apparent. He expressed genuine care for Kate and the kids, clearly hoping to build something more profound than a platonic friendship. Caught between her lingering history with Alexander and the possibility of a calmer, more dependable future with Dylan, Kate felt torn. One evening, as Kate and Helen chatted in Kate's living room, Helen casually asked, "Do you still love him?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Kate's immediate reaction was to deny it. But deep down, she wasn't so sure of the answer anymore. Dylan, sensing the growing bond between Kate and Alexander, decided to clarify where he stood. He knocked on Kate's door one evening, a tense expression on his face. She invited him in, puzzled by his somber demeanor. Over cups of herbal tea, Dylan admitted he had grown to care deeply for her and the children. He confessed he was ready to take their relationship to a new level, but only if Kate felt the same. Kate felt her pulse quicken. Her life had been in a balancing act, uncertain between lingering affection for Alexander and the possibility of a fresh start with Dylan. She thanked Dylan for his honesty, but couldn't provide the certainty he craved. "I need time," she said softly, tears glistening in her eyes. "This is all so complicated." Meanwhile, Alexander was dealing with confessions of his own. Mark Spaulding confronted him at work, concerned about Alexander's chaotic schedule and inability to focus. "Look, you either fix your personal life or step down," Mark threatened. The words stung, yet Alexander understood Mark's point. He was letting everyone down: shareholders, his family, and, most painfully, himself. That night, alone in his penthouse, Alexander made a decision that would alter the trajectory of their lives once again. Alexander reached out to Kate, requesting an urgent meeting at the park near her home, the one where Adrian and Sophie often played. When she arrived, she found Alexander on a bench, a contemplative look in his eyes. Her heart fluttered with worry and anticipation, recalling their many complicated encounters. Adrian and Sophie ran off to join friends in the playground, leaving their parents in hushed conversation. "I've made a decision," Alexander began, his voice earnest. "I'm stepping down from the company, at least for a while." Kate's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "You're resigning? But you've worked your entire life for that business." He sighed, the tension evident on his face. "I realize chasing wealth cost me everything. I need to fix myself, my relationships, especially with the kids. I can't do that if I'm obsessed with corporate battles." Kate was taken aback, not sure how to respond. She sensed the gravity of his statement, the sincerity in his gaze. Then Alexander reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. A letter. "It's therapy. Group sessions for families in crisis. I want us to try together. If you can't, if you don't want to, I understand, but I'm finally putting family first." A swirl of emotions coursed through Kate. She swallowed hard, thoughts spinning, unsure if this was a step toward redemption or another promise doomed to be broken. Despite her reservations, Kate agreed to attend the group therapy sessions with Adrian, Sophie, and Alexander. Dr. Joanna Clark facilitated the meetings, focusing on communication, trust, and emotional well-being. The first few sessions were fraught with tension. Adrian hesitated to speak, clearly torn between his longing for a father and the resentment of having been abandoned. Sophie clung to Kate's arm, eyeing Alexander with a mix of curiosity and fear. Kate herself felt exposed, her raw emotions laid bare for strangers to see. The room was silent except for the faint ticking of a clock. Adrian sat with arms crossed, his jaw clenched. Sophie played with the hem of her dress, avoiding eye contact. "Adrian," Dr. Joanna Clark said gently, "would you like to share how you feel about your father being back?" Adrian scoffed. "Why should I? He wasn't here when I needed him." The words hit Alexander like a punch. He swallowed hard. "I know I failed you," he said softly, "but I want to change that." "Oh yeah?" Adrian's voice cracked. "You think showing up now fixes everything? You missed my first basketball game. You weren't there when I had nightmares. You left us, Dad." Sophie suddenly burst into tears. "Why did you leave, Daddy?" she whimpered, curling into Kate's arms. Alexander felt his heart shatter. "I was selfish," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "But I love you both more than anything, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving it." Yet, slowly, breakthroughs emerged. Adrian opened up about his anger at missing father-son outings and feeling overshadowed by the scandal. Sophie showed Alexander a crayon drawing she made of their happy family, tears in her small eyes. Through these fragile moments, Alexander offered heartfelt apologies, acknowledging the depth of his mistakes without deflecting responsibility. Kate watched, her heart both softening and aching. She was touched by Alexander's willingness to face uncomfortable truths and the sincere affection he displayed for the children. Although the wounds ran deep, these sessions were a testament to their collective desire to heal. Each shared confession was a tentative step forward, a flicker of hope that perhaps the family's story was not irreparably shattered, but merely awaiting a new chapter. Amid these therapy sessions, Dylan noticed Kate's emotional distance growing. Although she remained kind, she no longer seemed fully present in their conversations. Recognizing the renewed involvement of Alexander in the children's lives, Dylan confronted Kate one evening after dropping off a casserole she had casually mentioned liking. He spoke gently. "I see how committed Alexander is to making amends. Do you think you might forgive him?" The question lingered in the air. Dylan's vulnerability was clear. He had invested hope in a future with Kate, but he wouldn't stand in the way if she decided to give Alexander another chance. Kate sighed, her eyes distant. "I don't know. Part of me hates him for what he did, and part of me remembers why I fell in love with him in the first place. I want to do what's best for my kids, and for myself." Dylan nodded, sadness etched on his face. "Whatever you decide, I'm here for you," he whispered. They embraced, a mixture of comfort and sorrow passing between them. Kate felt tears sting her eyes. In that moment, she realized she couldn't continue this emotional limbo forever. A choice, one way or another, was inevitable. With Adrian's 10th birthday and Sophie's 8th birthday only 2 weeks apart, Kate decided to throw a combined party in the backyard. It was the first time Alexander would attend such a familial gathering since the divorce. The children were thrilled at the prospect of a carnival-themed celebration with balloons, face painting, and a small, bouncy castle. On the day of the party, the backyard buzzed with laughter and playful shrieks. Tables were laden with homemade cupcakes, fruit punch, and colorful decorations. Kate wore a simple summer dress, her hair braided over one shoulder. She greeted guests with a smile, though her heart thudded nervously at the thought of Alexander's arrival. When he showed up carrying 2 carefully wrapped gifts and a balloon bouquet, the children ran to him, bridging a gap that once seemed insurmountable. Alexander's eyes glistened with gratitude as he hugged them. Witnessing this, Kate felt a flutter in her chest, an echo of old warmth that she'd tried to bury. Amid the swirl of festivities, Alexander offered a shy smile to Kate. He helped manage the game stalls, took pictures of Sophie blowing out her candles, and even assisted in cleaning up. To everyone present, it felt like a family reuniting for a moment suspended in time. That evening, after the guests had left and the children had fallen asleep amidst their mountain of birthday presents, Kate found Alexander in the backyard, standing by the dim glow of the tiki torches. The night air was warm, and the scent of cut grass mingled with the lingering aroma of sweet frosting. She approached him cautiously, arms folded. "Thank you for coming today," she said softly. "It meant a lot to them." Alexander nodded. "I'm grateful you let me be here. I still can't believe I almost missed out on all of this. On them." The emotion in his voice was palpable. Kate noticed the lines of stress around his eyes, the raw vulnerability that made him look more like the earnest young man she once married than the suave billionaire businessman he had become. "I wish..." He hesitated, words catching in his throat. "I wish I could turn back time and fix everything, but since I can't, I just want you to know how sorry I am." Kate felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. She recalled the moment she first saw him across the internship office, brimming with ambition. She never dreamed it would end like this, yet here they were, lingering between sorrow and a fragile hope for something new. As days turned into weeks, Kate found herself reflecting on Alexander's dedication. Each time she saw him helping Adrian with homework or carrying Sophie on his shoulders around the park, her heart softened. Though scars of betrayal remained, a quiet voice inside her whispered about the possibility of forgiveness, not just for Alexander but for herself as well. During a therapy session, Dr. Joanna Clark encouraged Kate to share her true feelings. Through tears, she admitted she still loved Alexander, despite everything. However, fear held her back. The fear of being hurt again, the fear of trusting only to be betrayed once more. Alexander also confessed that the love he had for Kate had never truly disappeared. It had been clouded by ambition, fueled by insecurities, and twisted by illusions of grandeur. But at his core, that love remained. The therapy group listened, offering supportive nods and gentle reassurances. Healing, they understood, was not a linear process. Spurred by these revelations, Kate decided on a cautious step forward. She agreed to let Alexander join her and the children for Sunday lunches, once a sacred family tradition. Although uncertain, she allowed herself a glimmer of faith that the past, while painful, need not dictate their future entirely. As Kate and Alexander grew closer through their shared therapy and renewed involvement in the children's lives, Dylan sensed an unspoken shift. One afternoon he found Kate in her garden, tending to a row of budding flowers. Mustering courage, he approached her gently and asked, "Are you going to give him another chance?" Kate's hand stilled over the blossoms. She exhaled deeply, meeting Dylan's gaze. I don't have a clear answer for you," she admitted, "but I feel something healing inside me when I see him with the kids. It's not easy to ignore." Dylan's expression remained compassionate, though heartbreak flickered behind his eyes. He nodded, forcing a tight smile. "I understand. I care about you, Kate, but I won't stand in the way of what you need to do for your family." Silence hung between them, thick with unspoken emotion. Eventually, Dylan slipped away, leaving Kate wrestling with guilt. He had been her rock when she was most vulnerable, the one who showed her kindness and stability. Yet the complicated love she shared with Alexander refused to be buried. Later that evening, Kate sobbed quietly into her pillow. She never intended to hurt anyone. But in love, there are casualties, even when hearts are set on the best intentions. One weekend, Kate invited Alexander to accompany them on a day trip to the lakeside where they'd once exchanged their wedding vows. Adrian and Sophie were elated, packing swimsuits and snacks. Though memories of their wedding danced in Kate's mind, she steeled herself, determined to keep the day light-hearted for the children. They arrived to find the lake shimmering under a bright sun, mirroring the sky's clarity. The children splashed along the shoreline, giggling as Alexander chased them with feigned monster roars. Kate settled on a blanket, watching the scene unfold as an odd mix of nostalgia and tentative happiness filled her. Later in the afternoon, while the kids built sandcastles, Alexander approached Kate by the water's edge. The spot was eerily reminiscent of where they had once stood, hand in hand, promising forever. A lump rose in her throat as she glanced at him. He reached for her hand. "Kate, I know I've done unspeakable damage, but being here, with you and the kids, it reminds me how precious life is. I'm begging you. Let's try again." Kate's heart pounded. She recalled the words of their vows, of fidelity and unconditional love, promises shattered but possibly waiting to be rebuilt. She felt tears slip down her cheeks, uncertain yet moved by the prospect of reclaiming what they had lost. In the weeks that followed, Kate and Alexander embarked on a cautious reconciliation. They continued attending therapy sessions, this time focusing on rebuilding their relationship. Honesty became their guiding principle. No more secrets, no more half-truths. Whenever doubts surfaced, they addressed them immediately. Alexander made it a point to integrate into Kate's simpler lifestyle. He helped prepare family meals, accompanied her on grocery runs, and spent quality time playing board games with the children. Little by little, the couple rediscovered shared joys, a love for classic films, a fondness for late-night conversations, and a mutual dream of seeing Adrian and Sophie grow up in a stable, loving home. Meanwhile, Dylan gracefully took a step back. Although the loss weighed on him, he chose not to linger in bitterness. He and Kate remained friends, the children still adored Uncle Dylan, and he continued to be a supportive neighbor. As seasons shifted, so did the tone of Kate and Alexander's connection. The deep chasm left by betrayal began to narrow. True healing, they realized, was a labor of vulnerability and patience. While neither pretended the scars had vanished, they each clung to the fragile hope that perhaps, through forgiveness and effort, they could chart a new course together. On a crisp autumn morning, Alexander walked up to Kate's doorstep with trembling hands. The children were at school, and the silence in the house was comforting yet filled with anticipation. He asked Kate to join him in the living room, where he handed her a small wrapped box. Kate opened the box, her breath hitching as she saw the simple silver ring. "It's not an engagement ring," Alexander clarified. "It's a promise that I'll be here for you and the kids no matter what." Kate ran her thumb over the small diamond. "You've changed," she admitted softly, "but I'm scared." Alexander took her hands. "I know, and I'll wait for as long as it takes." Tears welled in her eyes as she slid the ring onto her finger. Not a vow, yet, but a step toward something new. Kate's eyes flickered with curiosity. She opened it to find a simple silver ring adorned with a single tiny diamond, far less extravagant than the jewelry Alexander used to buy, yet far more meaningful. "This ring," Alexander said softly, "represents the second chance I never thought I'd deserve. I'm not asking you to remarry me yet, not until you're ready, if you ever are. But I want you to have this, to know I'm serious about standing by you and the kids for the rest of my life." Tears welled in Kate's eyes. The ring was a symbol of humility, a stark contrast to the grandiose gestures that once defined Alexander's courtship. She slid it onto her finger, the promise resounding in her heart. Though they both knew the road ahead would be far from perfect, they had chosen to face it together. Hand in hand, they stood with the knowledge that broken bonds could be mended when love, honesty, and perseverance took center stage. Thus concludes the turbulent journey of Alexander Caldwell and Catherine Kate Caldwell, a couple once splintered by betrayal, now united by the power of forgiveness and familial love. From humble beginnings to billionaire heights, Alexander's wealth couldn't shield him from the consequences of his own actions. Kate's shattered trust and the pain of raising children torn between two worlds underscored the very real complexities of love and loyalty. Yet it was their determination and a shared hope for healing that guided them to rediscover the essence of what made their marriage beautiful in the first place. If this story moved you, consider giving this video a like, sharing it with friends who love heartfelt dramas, and subscribing to our channel for more stories that delve deep into the human heart. Your support helps us continue crafting emotional journeys that remind us all, no matter how deep the hurt, forgiveness and redemption are possible. Thank you for watching.